Hello and welcome to this tutorial for Displace Painter. This is going to be a basic overview of the add-on and how to use all of its features. So to begin, after installing the add-on, go to the sidebar and Displace Painter. That is where Displace Painter is right now. The first thing you'll notice is that there is this warning up here at the top that says active object has less than 1000 vertices. That is because for painting you need vertices, and this cube does not have that many. If we just delete all but one face, we couldn't paint this because if we tried painting we'd just get the corners, and if we subdivide it a couple times, like maybe that, we could probably paint this. It wouldn't be that high resolution of painting, but it would work. But we still get this warning. That is because it does have less than 1000 vertices, because that is what is a good idea to have, and it changes depending on the size of your mesh. So it says 1000, just keep that in mind. But we are actually going to delete that and add the grid that comes in from the, and as you can see, this is just a subdivided plane, which is a great starting point for a lot of the things you'll do. So the first thing we're going to do is add a layer, and this is the base layer. This layer is what is in charge of the subdivisions. It has that B there, and you can disable it and all that stuff, very similar to the outliner here. If we go down to the base detail, we have all these settings for the strength, mid-level, direction, coordinates, and the texture. Now the texture is probably one of the most important parts. This is where you can control the scale, depth, color, like the brightness, contrast, and if it's a color instead of a grayscale, you can have saturation, and the red, green, and blue. You can also change the clamp. We also have the color ramp, which can be very useful. We can basically control the texture using a color ramp, which means we can do some pretty interesting things. We can just completely mess with how the texture works. One important thing to note is that the noise size, Blender limits it to 2. That is actually, you can actually type in a number higher than 2 and it will still work, which is very useful because oftentimes you're going to want a texture that is larger than a size of 2, and it goes pretty high, but realistically probably won't want it that high, depending on what you're doing, I guess. So that looks pretty good. We also have the subdivisions up here, which controls the level of subdivisions before the displacement, which gives it how much geometry it can actually displace. And we have the viewport smoothing, which is the subdivision applied after the displacement that also is set to smooth, in case you have a lot of jagged edges. It will help with that. One thing to be careful with is turning these values up too high can cause Blender to hang, and that's not fun. So we're actually now going to add our first layer. So we click this plus button here, And now we have a layer, and if we go to the base detail, you can see that we have nothing happens because there is nothing painted. So let's start painting. This is basically weight paint mode, so we have all of the settings and shortcuts work. If you have a drawing tablet, you're probably going to want to turn on pressure sensitivity to get the most out of the device. But we'll start painting. Something like that, I suppose. And now you can see that we have everything working. Some of the most common texture settings you're probably going to, or the ones that will have probably the largest impact, are the noise type and noise bases. The noise type is you select from all these options. We have Vernoy, which if we wanted to get something that looks like mountains, we could go here. And now we have something that looks like we have mountains. We have all the settings here. Also, under the clouds, there is the noise bases, which we can set to any of these, and these will give something similar. So this is the Vernoy again, which you can see also gives us something similar to mountains, but it looks different because it's using the cloud texture. And we have the base, and we have all these options to select from. See if we like any of them. We'll go something like this. Okay, and under the Vertex group, one of the options you'll see is the set weights. And this basically allows you to quickly clear or set the vertex group. So if we clear it, we can see that's gone. Or if we set it to 1, you can see everything uses that. And it's gone. Well, looks like I'm going to be repainting that. No problem. Another thing is there's this opacity slider, which controls how strong the overlay of the blue or the weights is, and that can be useful because now we can see more what we're doing. And another thing is if you come under the base detail and change it, you'll notice that it's changing how the layer displacement is, because this is applied before it. And if we don't want that, we can go to layer, and under the remove influence, click the add remove influence button, and automatically it selects the base layer. This can be any of the layers. But now this doesn't affect it. And actually, if we go into paint mode for the base, you can see that it's actually, you can't paint there. So that's a visual. Let's turn that down. Something like that. One of the things you can do is you have the base detail. You can add another detail. You can add as many as you want. And this basically has another noise texture, or noise texture displacement on top of it, so you can add precise details. And one of my favorite ways to do that is by using the clouds with the base of Vernoy crackle, or whatever it's called. And play with the strength. Anyway, you can see that we get these cracks in it, which can look really nice. You can also just add a cloud texture with a pretty low noise size and turn down the strength. You can also see what happens when you turn them off. Or that one off and see what it would look like without it. And this is where showing the subdivisions, increasing them really helps, because that way you get to see that. And as I can see, I kind of want to turn that down a bit. Something there. Same with this. It's a little extreme. The reason that these aren't turned up to begin with is that it will actually slow down the painting. So as you can see, if we go into paint mode and start painting, that it lags behind where my cursor actually is a great deal, compared to if we turn it off and go into paint mode, where it stays with it. So that is why these are turned down. And if you find that you're starting to have issues with it set to default, you can also just turn the viewport smoothing off, and hopefully that'll help. Things might not look as nice while you're painting, but at least painting will be a better experience. You can also change the order of the details, which does affect things. It doesn't change their name because you can't name details right now. That should be coming in the future, but you can do that. Same with layers, you can move the order of layers. And right there you can see actually the artifacts that happens when you have a direction of normal. If you have multiple of them or just one that's not the bottom, you can see these weird artifacts here. So if we would set this to Z, those would go away. But we won't. So that is why the default for all the other layers and details, the direction is Z instead of the norm. So we are going to add another layer here, real quick, and just paint something like that. Strength. Let's turn down the contrast. Something like that, and then we're going to add another very interesting detail noise type, which is fun, which can be really fun and look nice depending on if it's used well, which is the cell noise. Turn up the depth, turn down the strength, also view because you seem a little high. Strength there gives us a very interesting pattern. Also, I'm going to remove view from the base layer. Now I can see that what I have. I think I'll turn down the contrast somewhere. There we go. Something like that. I'm going to increase the subdivisions, and sometimes increasing the subdivisions doesn't look nice. Just don't increase them. You just keep in mind that when you increase the viewport, you might want to increase the render levels. So that looks pretty nice. Now we are going to go into shading mode to view the convert to attribute feature. So if we go here and just create a added mix RGB node, plug that into the base color, and we are going to set this one to green for like the grass, maybe a bit of a darker green, and this one would be gray for the mountains. Yes, like that. And then we were to come to the layer and select convert to attribute. Click that button. You can now see that we have this, the vertex group has been converted to dp-a layer. That is the name of the attribute. dp standing for Displace Painter, a standing for attribute, and then the name of the layer. So if we go and add an input attribute node, and what you can do is you can hover over this and press Ctrl C, and then paste it in here. We can set color, and now that is the opposite of what we want, but you can see that it is changing where the mix is. What we can do is we can invert that if we want, and also we have a lot of the green climbing up the mountainside. That is not what we want, so we can go and add a color ramp and change where that goes. Something like that. But also we have our other layer. We'll just duplicate this. And I think I have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled right now. Nope. I do not. Node Wrangler is a great add-on to enable when working with nodes. So we'll just enable that real quick. Anyway, so we are going to actually plug this color into here. We'll set this color to a brown and plug that in there. And we don't want it to be that layer, we want it to be this layer, so what we are going to do is we are going to convert this to an attribute, copy that, put that in there, and again we want to invert that. Now you can see that we have the brown there. So if, say we wanted this to be some dirt, change the color ramp a bit so that we get something like that. And yeah, that's it. And a note, this technique can be used for anything, not just the color. It could be used for really any of these, or even if you create node groups, you can essentially mix entirely different materials as long as they're node groups, which is really powerful. So that is basically it. Oh, there is the Invert Displacement, which inverts the Vertex group. So it inverts the displacement. So yeah, that is the basics. But one thing to note when you are working with materials is that the attribute is tied to the layer name. So if we go here, you can see, and if we change the layer name, because you can rename layers to be anything, you'll notice that breaks and that our attribute name has changed. You're going to need to put that in. That is just a thing to watch out for. If you're renaming layers, it might break attribute names in the materials. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. There is going to be a separate tutorial for working with displacement textures or image textures, because there are some things that you need to be aware of and know how to do. So that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.